Morning, everybody. I finally decided to say something about the war in Europe. I wanted to record this in Russian, but the Russian parliament just passed a law where if they catch you say anything that can be considered as fake news, something that's not aligned with the official line, you can be jailed or you will get a big fine. And even though I live in Canada, I still hold, even though my Russian passport expired, but I'm still technically a citizen of Russia. But first and foremost, I'm a citizen of Canada. And there was a reason I left Russia in 1997, but I still have relatives there. And I only heard one guy talk about this, and I think this is the key to understanding this conflict. Because they keep saying Putin invaded Ukraine, Putin, and first off, I'm not a fan of the guy, but it's just American speakers cannot seem to grasp how to pronounce the name of the guy. It's not Putin, it's Putin. Brits got it, French got it, Canadians got it, Putin. Anyway, one American senator even went as far as suggesting Putin has to be assassinated, which just shows you how little the West understands Russia. And again, this is about the key why Ukraine is suffering right now. Like, does this look familiar? That's Adolf Hitler. Now look at all the people behind him. This is a very interesting story from National World War II Museum. And I'm going to read you one passage. Where was it? Hitler had supreme authority as Führer, leader or guide, but could not have risen to power or committed such atrocities on his own. He had the active support of the powerful German officer class and of millions of everyday citizens who voted for the National Socialist German Workers' Nazi Party and hailed him as a national savior in gigantic stadium rallies. Let me repeat that. He had the active support of millions of everyday citizens who voted for the Nazi Party and hailed him as a national savior in gigantic stadium rallies. That sounds pretty similar how Trump was doing it, right? So anyway, if you look up Stalin, right? How many people died in gulags, in prisons during Stalin ruling? Millions, more than what was killed during World War II. And yet, when Stalin died, people were weeping, people were crying. During his funeral, if you look up old footage, the entire country was devastated. So the key to understanding this current conflict is to understand that, unfortunately, it's not Putin who invaded Ukraine. It's Russia who invaded Ukraine. I was very surprised the other day when I talked to my relatives in Moscow, Russia, and one relative, let's call her that, is 85 years old, and the other relative is 51 years old. And they both support this. When you ask them a question, the answer is pretty much taken from the TV address by Putin. And that's pretty much the entire country believes that one, Russia had to defend itself against NATO, and two, in 2014 in Ukraine, the legitimate power has been seized by neo-Nazis. And so that's what they believe. So they believe that they invaded Ukraine to liberate Ukrainians from neo-Nazis and defend themselves against aggressive NATO moves, because they think that Ukraine wants to be part of, well, they think that once NATO accepts Ukraine, that means the hostile army of Americans will be right at the border with Russia. Okay, so that's the key to understanding that. It's not Putin, it's the entire Russia. And why is that happening? Again, it's because of the information that is available to Russians, which is not accurate. And that's why now the Russian parliament passed that law about fake news. So anybody who says something they don't like can be jailed or fined. And newspapers are closing their doors, radio stations are closing their doors. Russia is now blocking access to Facebook and Twitter. And so now you're sitting in Russia in front of a TV, and the news anchor comes on and they say that US and Canada are supplying weapons to Ukrainians, neo-Nazis, and basically United States and Canada are on the side of neo-Nazis, and now Russia is defending itself. And so that's not helping at all, because now Russia, average Russian citizen, begins to believe, and that's what they've been told to believe, that America and Canada and all the NATO countries are the enemy of Russia, and the whole purpose is to crush it in the butt, so to speak. And so I watch CNN, I watch MSNBC, sometimes Fox, and there's no analysis. Nobody's talking about this. I only heard this interesting interview of France 24, which is a news channel on YouTube. They were interviewing Khodorkovsky, which was a billionaire who was jailed and spent, I think, 10 years in jail. He was accused of many bad things, and so now he lives in UK. And I was surprised when this guy actually said this. He says, Russian people support Putin. And so until you dissuade Russian people of that the information they're getting is incorrect, pretty much the entire power and public opinion of Russia is behind Putin. And so this senator who proposed to assassinate Putin has no clue, right? You cannot assassinate the entire country, right? So the most important thing is information, a real information. And all these news outlets, all they're reporting about is, the advance of Russian troops, the atrocities in Ukraine. Yeah, it's all good, but why there's no analysis? Why is nobody talking about the entire country supporting this guy, right? So you cannot dissuade people, right, by just showing them this, because first off, all this is not available. I'm talking like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. It's not available in Russia, right? So they're watching Russian TV, which tells them the entire different story, right? So Russian soldiers are being killed by neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and that only makes Russian people angrier, right, and more ready to fight. But they start to understand something, like when they took a few Russian soldiers, as prisoners in Ukraine. I read that most of them were like 19-year-old, 20-year-old, very young, basically kids. And they were saying that they were lied to by their officers. So basically, the guys who are fighting on the Russian side, just like the rest of the country, they have no clue what's going on, really. And to put things into perspective, I was reading about this because I left Ukraine in 92, right? So even though I'm Russian, my late father was from Moscow region, born in about 2 hours away from Moscow. My mother was born near Bryansk. So I'm Russian. Our whole family is Russian. But back then, Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was part of the USSR. And so when my dad was in the military, his last post, so to speak, was in Ukraine. And when he retired, we all stayed there because the government gave us the apartment. Like, you don't want to move. And then I just moved to Moscow by myself when Ukraine became independent. So I was not there after 1992. So I only read about this uprising, so to speak, in 2014 in Wikipedia. But people basically rose against corrupt government, like regular people in Ukraine. And that president was accused of lots of crimes, there was lots of criminal activity. He was actually in jail before he became president. So just look for your own answers, Don't trust, if you're watching this from Russia, don't trust the Russian reports. You got to look at this from many angles. And I think that's the key. So the key is to supply real information to everyday Russians. Without this, you cannot beat Putin because it's not him. It's not him, it's the entire country, unfortunately. So those are my thoughts on this conflict. And I just want to say that war is wrong, killing civilians is wrong, but you gotta give people proper information so that they understand what's going on. Over and out. Thanks for watching.